For this morning's meditation, we'll read from 2 Samuel chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. After this, David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah?" And the Lord said to him, "Go up." David said, "To which shall I go up?" And he said, "To Hebron." So David went up there, and his two wives also, Abinoam of Jezreel, and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. And David brought up his men who were with him, everyone with his household, and they lived in the towns of Hebron. And the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. When they told David it was the men of Jabesh Gilead who buried Saul, David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead and said to them, "May you be blessed by the Lord, because you showed this loyalty to Saul your Lord and buried him. Now may the Lord show steadfast love and faithfulness to you. And I will do good to you because you have done this thing. Now therefore let your hands be strong and be valiant, for Saul your Lord is dead, and the house of Judah has anointed me king over them." But Abner the son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, took Ishbosheth the son of Saul and brought him over to Mahanaim, and he made him king over Gilead, and the Ashurites, and Jezreel, and Ephraim, and Benjamin, and all Israel. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and he reigned 2 years. But the house of Judah followed David. And the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. Now that the threat from Saul was over, the natural thing for David to do was to return to his homeland. Yet, even in such a simple decision, he inquired of the Lord, not only whether he should return to Judah, but to which city he should go. His will was so broken that he would not do anything without consulting God. This could cause further delay or place him somewhere other than he would have preferred. But David had long known that the will of God was his main purpose in life. Obeying God's will is walking with him. In God's will, he would be able to handle any eventuality that came his way. God gave him the go-ahead and also named the city to which he should move. The ancient city of Hebron was located approximately 20 miles south of the present-day Jerusalem in the Judean Valley. In Genesis 13, we read about Abraham, who lived by the oaks of Mamre near Hebron after separating from Lot. Here the Lord first showed Abraham the land that would belong to him and his offspring, and he built an altar to the Lord. Hebron is also the site of the cave of Machpelah, which Abraham purchased as a burial place for his wife Sarah. This cave became the family tomb for Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and their wives. After Israel entered Canaan, Hebron was captured by Joshua. It was later given to Caleb as his chosen inheritance. However, it passed to the Levites as one of the cities picked to be a priestly city, and finally it became one of the cities of refuge, as we read in Joshua chapter 21. This city now became the seat of David's early kingdom. He reigned over Judah from Hebron for 7.5 years. He was not impatient to achieve his ends quickly. He himself knew that young lions lack and suffer hunger, despite their fighting and struggling. But those who seek the Lord shall not want any good thing. What God has promised, he will do, and we can patiently and faithfully wait for it. He commended the men of Jabesh Gilead warmly and blessed them in the name of the Lord for their loyalty towards Saul their master, who had delivered them from the Ammonites in the first days of his reign. They defied great odds to get back the dishonored bodies of Saul and his 3 sons from the Philistines, so that they could give them a decent burial in their own land. In this too, we see David at his best, paying due honor to Saul as king despite the injuries that he had endured from him, and rewarding what was well done by any of the people without partiality or an eye to personal interest. His generosity was just what would convince Israel that he was no rebel, despite his wanderings and sojourn in Philistia, but one whose heart was true to Saul. Thus he calls on these loyal servants of Saul to transfer their allegiance to him as God's anointed and Judah's anointed, recognized king. Judah was the undisputed leader of the tribes of Israel. Hence he points to their acceptance of him as solid grounds for Israel to accept his rule. Yet Saul's relative and General Abner refused to recognize his claim as the Lord's anointed and installed Ishbosheth, son of Saul, as the puppet ruler. Ishbosheth had not gone to the war with his father and brothers, but Abner now summons Israel to swear loyalty to him as Saul's son. Ishbosheth was obviously a man of weak character, not much in himself. He would never have resisted David's claim on his own, but he was not strong enough to stand against Abner's dominant ambition that stood in the face of God's revealed will. We don't have to be wicked at the outset. It is enough for us to be weak in faith and in love. Weakness delivers us into the traps of the evil one and makes us lose our way in disobedience and rebellion against God. There is no need or excuse for weakness when God has appointed his mighty armor for us. We become strong when we trust in him and walk in truth and righteousness in obedience to his Spirit's leading, for this is the armor of our spirit. Like Saul, Abner, who had already been a trusted and high official of Saul when David was just a lad going out to fight the giant, found it hard to bow to the divine appointment of David. But we can never fight successfully against God. Abner was fighting for nothing but his own will and ambition. Yet he glorified it by attaching Saul's name to his selfish rebellion. Even so, the flesh moves us to do wickedness under the finest of names, and we are self-deceived into rebelling against God's will. While Abner progressively reconquered the whole of the northern territory for Ishbosheth, beginning from that of Asher and extending downwards to Ephraim and Benjamin, David did nothing during these years but wait. He was a great general too, yet he did not actively rise against Abner's rebellion. He waited silently and trustfully, building his strength in God, careful only to defend himself in Hebron against attack. At the very outset, David asked the Lord about his return to Israel, but he did not want to trigger civil war in Israel. Here we see the difference between one who is moved by true love for God and for his people, and one driven by selfish ambition. David knew that there was such a possibility and did all he could to prevent it. Abner made no bones of openly opposing the choice of Judah and refusing to recognize God's anointed in the name of loyalty to the one whom God had already rejected. His will and mind were of the flesh and not turned to God. Finally, Abner showed his hand openly against David, marching to Gibeon to begin the final war against him. Initially, both sides sought to decide it by a bout between picked warriors from each army. But since this failed to decide the issue, pitched battle ensued in which Abner and his army were routed. David still maintained his stubborn forbearance and refused to take the battle to Ishbosheth. He allowed the Israelites to regain the shelter of their own cities. He was their king and not their slayer, even though they did not acknowledge him. Let us subdue our hearts before God and give him the trust and obedience that he deserves. Let every step, no matter how small it seems, be taken in awe of him. Let us not trust to our own deceitful flesh, but direct our decisions according to God's revealed will. Let us wait for God to accomplish his purposes and not stretch out our hands to take our own revenge. God bless.